Next, I want to talk about some of the final approaches to the mark. First, maybe we'll talk about coming to the port ley line with the wind coming from that black arrow over there. So if you're the blue boat here, you are in a tricky situation. You have to decide whether this boat is pinning you on purpose or whether they just happen to be in your way. So if they just happen to be in your way and they're not paying attention to you, a good move could be to bear off to get some extra space and then tack, round up, and then when they tack, you can approach them on starboard at the mark, and they should duck you here, unless if you've overshot the mark, they might tack in front of you, which is legal as long as you can finish the tack without forcing blue above close hauled. If you want to know about that, you can look up Rule 18.3. But a lot of the time, especially on the weekend when we're practicing this on purpose, blue or the Windward boat here will actually be trying to pin the leeward boat, trying to stop the yellow boat from escaping. So if the yellow boat bears off a little bit to get some distance, the blue boat might also bear off, take yellow to the ley line, and not tack until blue is on the ley line, and then blue can sail into the windward mark and finish ahead of, or come to the windward mark ahead of yellow. Pinning a boat to the port ley line works if no one else is around, but it's a dangerous move if this is a busy starboard ley line, because maybe you pass that boat, but then there's the whole situation of trying to enter this lineup of boats that can actually be very long. So I also want to talk about the approach on the starboard ley line here. What happens in this case? Maybe let's have green be our starboard boat. And as these boats approach, yellow can decide whether they want to duck green or whether they want to tack. And that's a really important decision because if yellow decides to tack, yellow has to then make a really good tack here to not foul green but still make it around the mark. And they also have to hail, they have to yell the word room to tack. It's one of only 2 times in the racing rules of sailing where you're required to yell something, to say something. So if you decide to tack, you have to say room to tack with enough time that this boat can avoid you. And if there's another boat over here, you have to say it even earlier. So you have to say it with enough time that this boat can pass on the hail to that boat. So room to tack, room to tack. And then this boat, let's take the final boat out of there for a second. This boat has to respond by either tacking or saying you tack and then avoiding yellow. So even if this is a ridiculous request, like green's over here and yellow says room to tack, you actually, as blue here, the hailed boat, you have to say you tack and avoid them, or you have to tack. But you can't decide that you know better than yellow and say, no, green's nowhere near. So if blue thinks that this is a bad call, thinks that yellow should not have hailed for room to tack, they still have to respond, but then they can say protest, and you can take it up in the room afterwards. And so that's for safety considerations, because maybe blue thinks it's unreasonable that yellow's hailing because of green here, but there's actually a rock in the water over here that yellow's trying to avoid. But tactically, this becomes an interesting situation, because if green is not here, yellow is basically definitely going to round the mark after blue, because blue can sail yellow past the ley line. Then when they tack, yellow is behind. But if there is a starboard boat coming, then yellow can hail for room to tack. Blue is required to either go behind and say you tack, or to tack. Then you might have a situation where yellow can shoot around the mark and blue can't. Hopefully blue doesn't try and all three of them get in trouble. Hopefully after tacking, blue realizes the situation, bears off, ducks, and rounds the mark like this, which is going to be a much better decision for blue and for everyone else if there's a whole bunch more boats coming. So the starboard boat can actually allow the pinned boat to escape the pin by being a reason to have to tack. Now, this leeward boat here doesn't have to call for room to tack here. They are allowed to duck this boat, but if you decide to duck a right-of-way boat, you actually owe the windward boat room to duck. So you can't squish blue off on green here. You actually have to bear off with enough room that both boats can duck. So you're still pinned in this situation. Because you have to give room to duck. So another quirk of this situation is that you're only allowed to call for room to tack if you're on close hauled or above. So if you've decided to duck this boat and you've borne off, you can't then say, just kidding, actually room to tack. So you would have to head up to close hauled first and then call for room to tack. And you'd have to give blue enough time. So as I've set it up here, there's not enough time for blue to now tack before there's a disaster. So you just have to think early enough about room to tack. So if you're being sailed past a ley line here, this is a good way to escape a pin, a call for room to tack there.